Welcome to Score on Air's OHSAA Hockey State Tournament Preview Show. This week we're bringing you the Final Four. My name's Julian Jackson. Travis Napper along with me today. Travis, how are you doing?
Doing really good. Really excited to talk a lot of hockey. It's Final Four time. It should be fun to talk about all these games and really break down to what we're in store for.
Okay, well that's excellent, Travis, and I really don't feel like you sound excited right now, but I know we're getting into a lot of information. It's been a wonderful week getting prepared for everything, and we're excited to bring you all of this news. Now, we've got a couple of teams, and there's some teams that you may not have thought about in this hockey tournament. First team I want to bring to you right now is Cuyahoga Falls Walsh Jesuit. Now, Walsh, being 17th in the state via myhockeyrankings.com, Walsh, I mean, tell me something about Walsh. I mean, what do we know about them?
Well, we not much because we haven't really seen them all year long, but they have seen a couple of teams that are in this Final Four. They've seen St. Ed's twice already. They did lose in both matchups by a score of 3-0, but they've had a good season, it seems, so far. They had a game against Cleveland Heights that they won 11-0. They had a game against Hudson that they won 3-2 in overtime. And 2 overtimes, I should say. Huntington Valley University School, they beat 2-1, and then Mentor, they beat 3-2 to get here. So they've had a pretty decent season up to this point. And for the most part, it's like you said, they seem like a little bit of an underdog here because nobody's really probably looking at them as the number 17 team. They're probably not getting a lot of looks from all these other teams, especially St. Ed's, who's beat them twice, I'm sure, is overlooking them a little bit if they ever get to that point. But, you know, right now they got a chip on their shoulder. They're ready to make an impact in this Final Four and prove that, hey, we belong here. We may be number 17, but doesn't mean that we cannot beat any team on any given day. And they're out to prove that.
Okay. Well, it's a good thing. They've lost to St. Ed's twice to this point, but they have seen some other teams that are in this Final Four right now. And, you know, they're 18-11-3. You know, it's not so often. I mean, they're going up against a team that's 27 wins and only lost 3 games, you know, throughout this entire year in St. Francis, so from Toledo. And so you would think, one might think, but never should assume that this is over, because in this day and age, anything can happen. And we also did talk to one of our very own, Ty Fisher with Score on Air, sat down with players from Walsh Jesuit, and here's what they had to say about their ranking this year.
Our team's kind of had the mindset that, hey, like, don't pay attention to the rankings. The rankings don't mean much. You know, we've been telling ourselves that, hey, we can compete with anyone in the state at any time, and with, you know, the right hard work, and we play our gritty physical playing style. And, you know, I think we've done just that, and I think that's part of the reason why we're this far. So
to add on to that, we can also give it to our coach. At the end of every practice, we skate, and he really conditioned us for this year.
And all of these things, of course, very important. And one of the most important things that they brought up was the fact that, I mean, of course, they're so fortunate to be in this Final Four. But the rankings really don't matter. Anything can happen on any given day. And this is a new season, a new year, you know, one that they hadn't seen, and one that they perhaps didn't even know that they were going to have.
Yeah, the only thing that really at this point the ranking could mean is fuel to the fire, because like we pointed out, they're number 17. They're going up against a number 2 ranked team. All that's going to do is fuel you to believe that, you know what, we're going to prove that we belong here, and we're going to prove that we can beat this other team. And, you know, I love these kind of matchups where you have a team on paper that seems like it should be the odds-on favorite to win this game going up against a team that nobody really expects has a chance. I love those matchups because 9 times out of 10, they end in ways you never expect. And so this matchup in particular is going to be a lot of fun to watch because both these teams are going to give it their best, and especially with Walsh Jesuit, I look forward to seeing what kind of intensity they come out with. I want to see their mindset in the first couple minutes of that game. How do they respond early on? Are they making big hits? What kind of play are they playing defensively? I'm really curious to see what sort of level of play they have early on, because that's going to be the deciding factor of how this game goes for them. how do they come out to start this game? Because they got to come out and they got to punch them in the face. They really do. And so it'd be curious to see how they're able to handle that.
Well, of course, it is going to be interesting to see how they're going to handle it. And as we did allude to earlier on, that with all of the unknowns living in an era of COVID-19, there are so many unknowns. And one of those unknowns being if they were going to even have a season at this point, as it was cut short last year after some teams made it to the Final Four when unable to play their game, which we'll get more to later on. But right now, I want to go ahead and show you a little bit of a sit-down between Bob McElligott and Mark Letestu with Coach Caleri from Walsh Jesuit.
So, to put that in perspective, our season started out with A, are we having one? B, our ice rink closed. So our normal home arena would be Kent State Ice Arena. And they shut it down on a Friday night when there were games scheduled for Saturday, not our games, but the youth program and everything. So with no, kind of an outlook as to, all right, we're going to reopen blank. And it turned out that the rink stayed closed all season. So our year starts with where are we going to play? Where are we going to practice? How are we going to be able to find ice? Are we going to be going at 5 a.m. or 10 at night? And fortunately we were able to find ice on Mondays over at the pond, which if you're not familiar with the area is way on the east side. And then Thursdays over at Strongsville, which is more to the west side. And our school's, kind of in the middle. So we're going 40 minutes one way or 35 minutes the other way to practice.
And it really is incredible how where we've made it to at this point in time, coming back from at this point last year, we were shutting down, and there are so many things to be said about that. But we're very happy to be here. We're happy we have a Final Four. We're rolling right into it at the Ohio Health Ice House. There's so much to look forward to this weekend. So, we covered up Walsh a little bit. And, of course, their opponent is one that many know the name of. It's Toledo St. Francis de Sales. And these guys are scary. They've got a great coach, Chris Varga. He's been doing this stuff for a long time. Heck, they won their last state championship in 2014-2015 when they beat St. Ed's. And they beat them 3-1 at Nationwide. So you're coming up to that, and Walsh is not fazed by that. They're not afraid. And to this point, 27-3-2, what do we know about St. Francis, Travis?
Well, for one thing, you said 27-3-2. We know they're good. So that's definitely one thing. As we pointed out earlier, they're number 2 ranked. So they're a good team. But the one thing that we do know for certain is they've never seen Walsh Jesuit. So they don't know what to expect either. So again, like I pointed out, that first couple minutes is going to be very critical, not only for Walsh Jesuit, but it's going to be very critical for St. Francis as well, because they don't know what they're getting into, at least from a standpoint of they've never seen this team before. So they don't know what to expect in the first opening minutes of the period once this game starts. So this is going to be a good feeling out process for both these teams to kind of get an idea of what they can expect from both these teams, just from an overall physicality standpoint and just from a defensive standpoint and an offensive standpoint, what these two teams are going to look like. Because you got St. Francis, who is very good. They've won a lot of games. And then you have Walsh Jesuit, who hasn't won as many games, but still seems like a very solid team that has no problem scoring, much like St. Francis de Sales. So St. Francis de Sales, I imagine the key for them is score as much as possible, but they have a chip on their shoulder as well. Last season didn't necessarily pan out the way they probably wanted it to, as it did for most, because of the fact that COVID interrupted a lot of this. So every single one of these teams has a chip on their shoulder, and St. Francis is no different.
Well, and one of the biggest parts about the team, and one of the things that you hear Coach Varga allude to so much when he's talking about his team, he holds them in very high regard. He is very sure that they're disciplined. He wants to be sure that these kids are on top of their work. Their academics are coming first in their program. But in addition to that, he knows what he's put together to this point. And being disciplined, hardworking, and having all these guys, some of them who came into the season last year, he had talked about. And, when you know that you're making it up to a Final Four and you make it all the way there and you go home empty-handed, what does that actually feel like? So when you think about this team, who now some of these guys are coming in, some kids lost their senior year, and it's upsetting because you're never going to get those years back. But there are some juniors who are now seniors, and these guys are coming through to play, and now they're coming back with a vengeance. And they've never seen Walsh Jesuit before, but Bob McElligott sat down with Chris Varga and talked to him a little bit about what it was like last season and the ending.
And the biggest thing is last year we were going down the Final Four, and most of these kids are returners, and there's a little chip on their shoulder that they wanted to get back because they felt like they lost something and they didn't go through with that experience last year.
And during all this time together, there was so much to have to think about, so much to have to reflect on. These kids during the offseason not knowing whether or not they were going to be playing, going through some cancellations. At one point, they had a matchup against Upper Arlington that then had to be rescheduled because of COVID protocol just in Lucas County. And that was in the later part of 2020 when they had to cancel that game. But the players being able to come together and doing, hockey. So many times when we talked to these guys throughout this week, it was, hockey brought us together. I remember you asking some guys, what is this like living around this time when you can't be together that often, and when you are made to, be at home with just your families, and what does that look like? And I remember so many of their answers and them just saying, when we're together, it's eat, breathe, and sleep hockey. And what that does is it enhances camaraderie. It enhances togetherness. And bringing all of these guys together does nothing but help you build more chemistry in your program. And they did exactly that. We sat down with St. Francis, and these captains from the team talked about their chemistry.
I would definitely say the camaraderie. Last year we had a little bit of tension on the team between a couple of our guys, and we've seemed to figure it out from year to year. And then we got a couple more guys. Some of us have been playing together for almost 8 years now. We've been playing together since we were little mites. So I think that sets us apart from the team last year and this year. So, I mean, obviously it's really different from past years in that way. Like last year, we'd have team dinners almost every week outside of the rink. And we were able to do more stuff like in our locker room and everything. But this year, like you said, I mean, we just have to make the most of what we can do. So practices, I mean, we're always the banner's there always. We had workouts too, so that helped out. So we had workouts before practices for most of the season at the school. And, we just try to make the most of it. I mean, most of our social life for the last couple of months has been hockey. So our guys have been really focused on hockey and more hockey. And I think that's really helped us out in a weird way.
And Travis, it's important to remember that it's not always about chemistry, but it helps a lot, doesn't it?
It absolutely does. It's a big factor whenever you're playing a team sport is what is your chemistry like with the guys on the ice? And that plays a huge factor into it. Yes, the X's and O's are important. The skill level is important. But at the end of the day, if you're not gelling with your teammates, if you don't have a good working chemistry with your team, it can be very dysfunctional and can lead to some very difficult things, because if you're not used to seeing, for example, if this player is lined up on this side of the ice and you're lined up and you want to make a pass to him, if he doesn't know your mindset, it can be very crucial, because then that affects the X's and O's of hockey, because now I don't know what you're going to do. You don't know what I'm going to do. We're dysfunctional and we just cannot seem to get on the same page, and that affects your game. So it's not talked about as much, but it is equally as important to the game of hockey.
Well, and I believe that argument can be made, and obviously practice will help you, but not seeing a team ever before, you can only go back, watch film, and see what they're doing, and trust the process and know that what you've been doing all season to come to 27-3 is what's going to work and help propel you towards quite possibly a state championship. Now, being second in the state, via my hockey rankings is, that's important, and that holds a lot of value. But they're also playing in a different type of district, in that Northwest Ohio hockey. It's far and few as far as how many teams they have in that area. If you look at their first win, Sylvania Southview, 11-0. St. Francis against Bowling Green, they're in the second or in the third round, was 4-2. They beat up on Bowling Green, another great team. And then you've got St. Francis. You have Sylvania against Sylvania Northview, and they then won that game 5-2. They had less games to a district title in the Sylvania district, but they came out victorious there. Now, when you look at Walsh in particular, they had a tough road. Very competitive hockey up in the Cleveland area. And we know this because they not only have a Brooklyn East district, but they have to make a Brooklyn West. And we'll get to that later on. But Brooklyn East, you come out 18-11-3. We mentioned that not a lot of people might think that, they may not think that Walsh deserves to be here. But let me tell you why they do deserve to be here. They ran through Cleveland Heights after a first round bye in the second round to win 11-0. Then they followed that up with a 2 overtime victory over Hudson. And you think these kids don't have heart? Come on now. Then from there, they go on and beat the University School. And that's what I've heard from some coaches, that they've gone back and they've watched that tape in particular to be able to study Walsh for this matchup. That's important. University School, a perennial powerhouse. When you look at their program, you know what they're doing. They're producing great players, and from there, they've got a great team. And this happens year in and year out if you look at history. Walsh was able to overcome and win that game in regulation 2-1. And then from there, it was Walsh beating Menor 3-2, as you had talked about earlier on. Travis, what do we think this matchup is really going to look like? All records aside, all rankings aside. It's 17 versus 2. It's nothing versus nothing. It's in the Ohio Health Ice House this weekend. It's Walsh versus St. Francis. What are we looking at?
Well, the one thing you pointed out is both these teams had a first matchup where they won 11-0. And then it got slowly harder from there. So both these teams are very well battle-tested. Walsh Jesuit is a little bit more battle-tested because they had to play one extra game. But they also had a game where they had to go into double overtime, like you said. So they've been through the ringer. That can do a lot for you when you're going into a game where, especially where you're the underdog. Because you've been through the ringer. You've been battle-tested. You've had to fight, scratch, and claw. This is just another game for you at this point, to just go out there and continue what you've been doing, which is scratch and claw to get where you want to go. And for Toledo St. Francis, all they've got to do is continue to play their style of hockey. They cannot let that get the best of them. They just have to play smart, play within their own program, play within their own game plan, and not do anything that's going to give any sort of firepower to Walsh Jesuit. And on the flip side, Walsh Jesuit, play with that chip on your shoulder. But at the same time, much like I said for St. Francis, Walsh Jesuit has to play smart too. They cannot get too emotional in this because that's going to get them in trouble. So both these teams have to play smart and they have to play physical. Walsh Jesuit probably a little bit more just to make an impact and just to prove a point, but you also have to play smart.
So physicality, smart play, likely staying out of the penalty box.
Yes.
Making all the right decisions. But the two things that we know is that these teams can score goals, and these teams have been playing together through and through out this entire season. And we're very excited for this matchup. Before we go ahead and hit a break, I want you to know that this is all brought to you by the Score on Air Network.
Have you always dreamed about a career in sports broadcasting but aren't sure where to begin? Well, if so, then look no further than the Sports Emphasis program at the Ohio Media School. Whether in front of the camera, on the microphone, or behind the scenes, you'll learn from a pro to be a pro in the Sports Emphasis program at the Ohio Media School. You'll get hands-on training and live in-the-field experience at some of Ohio's biggest sporting events. you'll be the star of your very own webcast, and you'll get the opportunity to interview some of Ohio's biggest athletes. Call us today at 614-655-5250 or visit our website at beonair.com.
Do you have design ideas for t-shirts but you're not sure where to go? Go to Mojo Sports Gear. That's right, Mojo Sports Gear. At Mojo Sports Gear, you can get custom-made shirts. Whatever design you need, Mojo Sports Gear can provide it. Don't forget to grab a custom-made cap on your way out and rock the best headgear in the game. Give them a call at 614-864-6656. That's 614-864-6656.
In sports, you want to have a player that can get the job done right every time. A real all-star, somebody that's dependable and you can turn to when the game is tough. That player in the audio-video industry is the theater people. From setting up your home's Wi-Fi network and offices, conference rooms, to setting up home theater inside or outside, to setting up the systems to make your home run smarter and safer as well. The theater people can do it all with the quality of professionalism you can expect every single time. That isn't just a great all-around player, that is an all-star. That is why we are the leaders in audiovisual installation in Central Ohio. So call us at 614-604-6327 or check out our website at ttpcolumbus.com to figure out which products will fit you. And don't forget, amplify your personality.
Welcome back to the OHSAA Hockey Tournament Preview Show. And we've got the Final Four this weekend. Travis, we just went over two great teams playing in the first matchup of the Final Four this weekend at the Ohio Health Ice House. We still have two great teams to go. It's the St. Ed's Eagles versus the Upper Arlington Golden Bears. And man, those St. Ed's Eagles have won 25 games this year and only lost 3. This team is incredible. What do we know about them?
Well, one thing we know is, as you pointed out, they're very good. They had 25 wins and only 3 losses. And coming into this matchup, they had a lot of great games. They had Elyria Catholic that they won 11-0. They took on Westlake that they won 10-0. Avon they won 10-0, and then Rocky River they won 6-1. So they've had a lot of good games that are pretty easy, it seems like, and then it slowly got a little bit harder from there. They're definitely looking forward to this matchup because it's definitely not going to be an easy one. They've faced Upper Arlington before, so they have a general idea of what to expect. Unlike the matchup we talked about before with St. Francis Sales and Welsh Jesuit, St. Edwards knows what they're getting into with Upper Arlington. Maybe not so much as they did the first time, but they've seen this Upper Arlington team before, so they know what to expect. And we sat down with some of the St. Edwards players and the coach to talk about that prior matchup and what they need to do looking forward to this matchup this weekend.
Our last game, I don't know, we're just such a different team, I believe. We've been working really hard. We've been making adjustments, and I don't know, I think we've just put ourselves in a good position here coming into this weekend.
Yeah, I mean, he's really good. I think last time we played them when they beat us, I think he had like 55 saves or something like that, which is just crazy. So we're preparing. We have some shooters on our team that can put the puck in the net, and we're gonna crash hard and stuff. So.
And the big thing that I really wanted to ask them, especially, was that Garrett Alderman matchup, because we've seen a lot of Garrett Alderman over the course of the last couple months and weeks. We know what he can do, and they do as well. So they know what to expect. As they pointed out, he'd seen, I think it was 55 shot attempts. We saw him face 44 in the first matchup against Olentangy Liberty in the CBJ Cup. They know they're getting into a matchup with a very intense goalie that is going to do everything he can to help his team win a game. But again, that's the player's standpoint. We also had a chance to sit down and talk to the coach of St. Ed's as well and get his opinion on what this team is going to have to do to take on this very skilled Upper Arlington team and what they have to do to win the game.
Evan played in our Cleveland Cup championship game, which was a overtime game. It was a shootout game. He played really good under some pressure. So I kind of liked where he was in that headspace. So, but to answer your question, we've been rolling with a 3 goalie system all year, just with this whole COVID thing, not knowing, I wanted to make sure we had at least a goaltender prepared and ready for the state tournament.
You guys split against UA earlier this year. What was the biggest thing you noticed from win to loss in those games, and how do you take that into this series, this game?
So we played them back in December, I believe, both those games, and I've had to go back and watch some film on them, and they're a good team. They're solid. They got really, really good goaltending.
And so you've heard from the coach, you've heard from the players. They know what they have to do to take on this Upper Arlington team and beat them. Now it's just a matter of going out there and executing it this weekend.
Yeah. Well, and it's a very important position to be in order to be able to beat this team now. You've beat them once, on December 20th. Then from there, they come back and Upper Arlington gets their win on January 16th. So a bit of back and forth, but this is the rubber match. This game is win or go home, as we've been saying it for a very long time. And no matter what the records are, no matter what the rankings are, they alluded to how great Garrett Alderman is and the number of saves that he's had. But they also have a few different fixes, and you've got to go back and look at that film. You've got to know what it is that you're up against, because this is the team that handed you one of your 3 losses throughout this season. So you've got to be a little bit tense going into this game, I feel.
Yeah, you are, but you have to also try to find a way to push that aside. You cannot dwell on that. You have to realize that you can only control what you can control. You can only play your game, and look at that game where you won. Obviously, you do want to look at the game where you lost and figure out where you can fix the mistakes, but look at the game where you won. Figure out what you were doing right that helped you to win that game. Don't focus so much on the loss in this case. You really want to touch on what it was you did in that win that helped you, and just try to repeat that. That's all you can do at this point. You cannot dwell on that loss too much. And hey, it was one of your 3 losses. That's going to eat at you, but at the same time, it was one of your 3 losses. You're good. You're a very skilled team. You have the capabilities to go out there and win against basically anybody. Go out and prove it.
Well, and at this point, we talked about St. Ed's, and now the next team to talk about is the Golden Bears. This is their home rink. This is something they've been doing all year long. Forget about their record. They're in the double digits when it comes to losses, but they've won 22 games. A lot of their games throughout this season were in tournament play. They played against St. Ed's. They played against Walsh. They played against St. Francis. And in doing so, they gained a lot of experience throughout this season to be able to be in the position where they are now. Great goalie play. As you can see with St. Ed's, they only let up 1 goal in all of the games in that Brooklyn West district, which it seems like that's an incredible feat in some way. But there are no surprises there, as we knew St. Ed's was going to be number 1, as they have been in the state all year long. They've had a number 1 seed everywhere they've gone. But UA, on the other hand, has had to fight in so many ways. They were sitting behind the St. Charles team, and they were able to prove that they were better than that St. Charles team by beating them in the CBJ Cup Finals and then beating them in the Columbus District to be able to be the district title winner. And when you look at that and everything else, I mean, Travis, tell us a little bit about what road the Golden Bears had to take to be in this Final Four.
Well, it's kind of funny. It's a tale of 2 different games between these 2 games that we're talking about, but it's almost a tale of the same story. Because much like West Jesuit had pretty close games going down the stretch, Upper Arlington had the same case. Upper Arlington had to take on a Columbus Academy, and they won that one 4-0. So pretty easy game to go out there and start out your path. Then they take on Olentangy Berlin 2-0. Okay, it's getting a little bit harder. Then they take on Olentangy Liberty 3-2 in overtime. So there's your first battle test really right there. And then, of course, the finals, they take on St. Charles, who these 2 have been going at it for a very long time. We were very fortunate to watch that game and cover that game. It was a battle. It was a very, very strong battle between 2 teams, and they came out on the winning end 2-1, did Upper Arlington. So they're very battle-tested, much like I said West Jesuit was. They're very battle tested. And as you see, a lot of these games, not that high scoring. We look at the St. Ed's ones, 11-0, 10-0, 10-0, 6-1. Upper Arlington has had to fight for their wins. That is so crucial for a team going into a matchup like this because they know what they have to do. And again, we bring up the fact that they have to scratch and claw to get to where they want to go, especially for Upper Arlington because of the fact that they're in the Columbus District. The Columbus District does not very often get past this point. That is a big chip on your shoulder if you're Upper Arlington, especially if you know you have the capabilities to be that one team that can right that wrong.
They've got Garrett Alderman. He was first team All-State last year. They have so much manpower on this team, so much camaraderie. But I sat down with some of the players earlier on this week, and they told me about what kind of leadership it takes to be where they are today.
We just have to make sure we're staying focused, so we show the leadership to the younger guys so that they stay focused this far in the year. No one in this program has ever made it this far, or at least in the program right now. So we're just trying to stay focused on the goal and not look past any team.
Yeah, I think a big part of it comes in taking another step as a team in the postseason to really make sure you're playing your best and make sure that you're focused on the next game every time because it could be your last.
I would say more of a lead by example. I would say Whitty could be more he's the more talkative one. So I just try to go out every practice, every game, work my hardest and show that to younger guys and even other captains so that they can take after me. And
Adam not being as vocal, I think it allows for our two A's, Garrett Alderman and Max Robbins. They're pretty vocal in the locker room as well. So that helps that we have multiple people leading by example and telling people how they should do things, what they should be focusing on, things like that.
No Upper Arlington team has won this game. So this game is pretty big for us because we want to show that Columbus, Ohio hockey is big and that not every team in this Final Four needs to come from Cleveland or Cincinnati or whatever. So this is a big game. We want to go out there. We have to beat Eds and then go to the state final.
Yeah, the win on Saturday was huge. It's something that our program hasn't done in 14 years, I believe. So it's really nothing that any of us or any of our siblings or people that we know are older would have seen 14 years ago. So I think it's big to stay focused this weekend because we have made it this far, but we're still not done because, we're 2 games away from a state championship. So all we got to do is put it together for 2 good games, play 2 of our hardest games of this season, and we'll see where that takes us.
It's always important to have great leaders on your team, and the seniors and Whitty Tavonian and Adam Garrett have brought them here today by exerting all of their leadership. Being vocal isn't everything. Leading by example has a lot to do with this thing, Travis, and that's what they're bringing to the table. They have A's and their captains, like they mentioned, Garrett Alderman and Max Robbins, but they have so much more than that that is added to this team as they've grown throughout the year. They mentioned how when I spoke to them, they talked about how they switched up some lines. They got a little creative, and they're really hitting their stride now to be able to make it to this point. This is something they haven't done in 14 years. There's not been teams, and no one in this program from freshman to senior has seen a Final Four. So of course it's going to be huge. Of course they have this chip on their shoulder, and you know that they're dying for a state championship. So in looking at all of that, of course they have to get through St. Edward's first. Bob McElligott sat down with Coach Dorsett of the Upper Arlington Golden Bears, and here's what he had to say.
We have to make sure we're disciplined. We have to stay out of the penalty box. I think we have to, set the pace early. We have to get pucks deep and make sure that we're playing physical and within the whistles, none of the stuff in between whistles, and just make sure that we wear them down and we, play solid defensively, keep everything to the outside. We've got a good goaltender, so we'll give him shots from the outside, and Garrett will make those saves that he needs to make, and hopefully we can create some offense by playing good defense and come out on top.
Great defense will set up a great offense, and that's exactly what the Golden Bears are going to need if they plan on beating St. Edwards.
Yeah, and I like another thing that he said, is set the pace, because at the end of the day, that's going to be very critical for all these teams going into the Final Four, is set the pace early and set it quick and set up for the rest of the game, because that's going to be very critical for all these teams. What sort of pace are you going to bring for your opponent? Because that's going to tell you what the rest of your game is going to look like. So if they know what pace they want to set, they're golden. No pun intended.
We are in for 2 exciting matchups this weekend in the state Final Four tournament at the Ohio Health Ice House, and you can catch coverage of these games on NFHSnetwork.com. For everyone here on Score on Air Network, I'm Julian Jackson with Travis Snapper.